They all thought I was just the quiet, harmless little sister who played with spreadsheets. At every meeting, my sister would talk over me, roll her eyes, and act like I was just lucky to have a seat at the table. But that day, that boardroom turned dead silent. Because when she mocked me in front of everyone, again, I finally stood up and dropped the one thing she didn't see coming: the truth. The contract, my ownership, and the fact that for years, I had been the one holding the company together while she took the credit. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family, until the day you finally stood up and showed them who you really are? If that hit close to home, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories about breaking free from silence, claiming your worth, and rewriting the rules they tried to trap you in. I'm Hannah Brooks. In my family's eyes, I've always been the just enough child. Not charming like Claire, not a people person, and definitely not the type to turn heads when I walk into a room. I work at the family business, Brooks & Sons, which sounds fancy. I know, but really, I'm just the girl in accounting, glued to a desk, crunching numbers to make sure this whole machine doesn't blow up from debt. But the thing is, no one pays attention to the one counting the money. People only remember who brings in the big contracts. My parents, George and Margaret Brooks, built the company from scratch. They started with a tiny garage, and now it's a furniture manufacturing business with over 50 employees in our small town of Willow Creek. Claire, my sister, is their pride and joy. Always has been. Tall, beautiful, magnetic, the kind of person who makes everyone lean in when she talks. She was homecoming queen back in high school, and now she's the head of sales, not because she applied or anything, but because, well, family. I, on the other hand, joined the company after finishing community college. Tucked away in a corner near the copier, drowning in spreadsheets, I pretty much blended into the background. Which, by the way, no one ever seems to mind. That morning was nothing special. I walked into the office holding a stack of reports. Said hi to a few people. Nobody looked up. Claire was in the center of the room, bragging about a new deal she just closed with a client in Philadelphia. People stood around clapping like she just cured cancer or something. I shook my head, walked by quietly, sat down at my desk, and opened up a file. The numbers were rough, cash was tight, and we had a big payment due on Monday. Funny how no one claps for the person who keeps the lights on. That night, we held the company's 40th anniversary party. The whole family showed up, all dressed up, in this fancy event hall with candles, white roses, and old black and white photos of our company's journey from garage to factory. Claire, of course, was the MC, red dress, mic in hand, like she was born to take the stage. She gave this big speech about our family legacy, highlighted Mom and Dad's achievements, then moved on to herself and her vision for the company. Then came my name. Claire glanced around and gave this little smirk before speaking into the mic. And of course, we can't forget my sister, Hannah. She's been with us all these years, making sure the numbers line up. Not everyone loves spreadsheets, but hey, somebody's gotta do the paperwork, right? She laughed, and the room followed, including my dad and a few folks from upper management. I just stood there with my wine glass, smiling politely. Mom looked down at her lap. And me? I felt like someone had pulled the floor right out from under me. At that moment, it was like the whole room shrank, and I was the only one standing in a dark corner. Invisible, like I was just an old chair everyone passes by every day, useful. Maybe, but never worth noticing. It wasn't that I was surprised. I've gotten used to being overlooked. But what made my hands shake wasn't the laughter. It was the arrogance, the casual dismissal in Claire's voice. Like I was nothing. Like I wasn't the one who stayed up 3 nights straight fixing a payroll error before the audit. Like I didn't write the desperate email to the bank back in 2018 while everyone else was on vacation in Florida. Like I didn't quietly pay off high-interest loans with my own savings just to keep our machines running. I drained the rest of my wine and swallowed every emotion burning in my chest. This wasn't new, but this time was different. Something inside me cracked, something that said, enough. Later, I stepped outside to the balcony, away from the lights. Away from the stage, the night air was cool against my skin. Emma, one of the few people in the company who actually treats me like a person, followed me out and asked, "You okay?" I stared out at the street below, then whispered, almost to myself, "They think I'm just the office girl. They have no idea what I've done to keep this place standing." Emma didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her silence held more respect than 1,000 of Claire's applause breaks. What they don't know is, I'm ready, and next time I speak, they're gonna have to listen. After the party, I went home to my tiny apartment just outside of Willow Creek, the same one I've lived in for 8 years. Nothing fancy. A small kitchen, a couch that sags a little in the middle, and a window that looks out onto the neighbor's backyard where their golden retriever, Max, always barks at squirrels like he's protecting the White House. I kicked off my heels, tossed my bag on the chair, and sat at the dining table, more like a glorified fold-out desk, staring at the framed photo I kept there. It was old and a little faded. Me and Claire, maybe 8 and 11, sitting in front of our first family-owned truck with ice cream smeared all over our faces. Back then, we were inseparable. We'd build forts in the living room, sneak cookies from the kitchen, and dream about opening a candy store together someday. But somewhere along the way, things changed, or maybe we did. I started working part-time at a grocery store when I was 16. Not because I wanted to, but because bills were piling up. And Mom was having health issues. And Dad refused to let go of any employees even when sales dropped. Claire, meanwhile, was out getting her hair done for pageants and practicing speeches about world peace. She didn't know, or didn't care, that the lights almost got shut off that fall. I got a scholarship to the University of Pittsburgh. Full ride. I didn't go. Couldn't. The company was in bad shape. And someone had to help. So I stayed. I took night classes at the community college, learned accounting basics, and then started digging into the mess that was our financial records. And oh, what a mess it was. In 2018, the company was 2 months from losing everything. We owed the bank nearly $200 and had no idea how to repay it. Nobody, not even Dad, was reading the fine print on those high-interest loans. I remember sitting in the office one night, cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by stacks of unpaid invoices and tax notices, thinking, if I don't fix this, we're done. So I did. I worked with our then accountant, a good man named Walter who retired a year later, to restructure the debt. I taught myself everything I could about refinancing, capital flow, IRS penalties, you name it. I spent weeks emailing the bank, negotiating a payment plan, and eventually, I signed the deal that bought us time. Then I did something I've never told anyone. I emptied out my personal savings, $30 I'd built up since high school, and paid off the worst of our debts. Quietly, anonymously, just so the business, and my family, wouldn't fall apart. And Claire? She was too busy, keeping the company spirit alive, with Instagram posts and new client lunches to even notice. When the bank froze our credit line, she thought it was a glitch. When we pulled through, she took the credit. I didn't speak up. I figured, what mattered was the company survived. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Back in the present, the company was once again juggling cash flow like a game of hot potato. Claire had just called me that morning, not to say thanks. Not to check in, but to bark orders. We need you to move money around so we can fund the new ad campaign. She said, like she was ordering takeout. Shouldn't be hard. You do those little spreadsheet things all day. Right? Little spreadsheet things. I bit my tongue. Again. I spent the next few nights working late, balancing vendor payments and negotiating with the bank so we wouldn't bounce payroll next Friday. It's not glamorous, and no one claps for it, but it's what keeps the company standing. I kept a box under my bed, an old shoebox full of contracts, bank statements, receipts, and emails, every proof of everything I've done to hold this place together. Not because I wanted revenge, but because a part of me knew, one day, I might have to remind them. I started writing down every deal I negotiated, every wire transfer I pushed through just in time, every silent sacrifice. It wasn't about keeping score. It was about remembering that I mattered, That even if they wouldn't give me credit, hell, even if they forgot I existed, I wouldn't forget who I was. One night, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "You're not useless. You've never been." I said it again, louder this time, and then I laughed, because it felt like saying something forbidden, like I wasn't supposed to believe in myself. But I did, quietly, deeply. Emma came by the next day during lunch. She brought me a coffee, sat on the edge of my desk, and said, "I don't know how you do it. Keep your head down while everyone walks all over you." I shrugged. "Habit." She looked at me, really looked, and said, "You deserve better, Hannah. They don't see it now, but one day they will. Or they'll wish they had." I didn't say anything back, but something in me shifted. I wasn't just the girl behind the numbers. I was the one keeping the company alive, even if they were too blind or too proud to see it, and whether they liked it or not. The day was coming when I wouldn't stay quiet anymore. Board meetings at Brooks & Sons are the same every year, long, filled with buzzwords, and barely anyone actually listening. Claire always shows up late but somehow still ends up talking the most. And me? I usually sit at the far end of the table, holding a thick stack of financial reports, waiting for my turn to present the boring numbers. This year's meeting was in the main conference room on the third floor. The long, polished table reflected the harsh white lights above. On the wall hung a framed portrait of my dad in his younger days, back when he was just starting the company. He looked so hopeful. I stared at that picture and thought, if he still had even half that hope now, maybe things would be different. Claire stood up to kick things off with another one of her dramatic pitches. "I think it's time to expand beyond the state," she said, waving around some flashy PowerPoint slides. "This is our opportunity to make Brooks & Sons a national brand." A few board members nodded along like they were hypnotized by her confidence. Then it was my turn. "And now Hannah will go over the financials," George said flatly, like he was reading off a checklist. I stood, opened my folder. "In the last quarter, we've seen a tightening of cash flow, rising costs, delayed payments from 3 major clients, and..." Claire cut in with a laugh. "Let's keep it short, Hannah. No one came here to hear about spreadsheets." A few chuckles around the table. My chest tightened. I took a deep breath, then slowly set the papers down, and looked straight at her. "Boring, huh?" I said, calm but clear. "Then let me tell you something a little more exciting." The room fell silent. I know you all love talking about vision and branding and expansion. But does anyone here remember how, in 2018, this company was 2 months away from bankruptcy? When we owed the bank nearly $200, I paused. Looked around. Blank stares. Claire shifted in her seat. "You talk about growth, Claire, about leading the company forward. But who negotiated the debt restructuring with the bank? Who wrote every email, made every phone call, calculated every payment strategy?" I opened my bag and pulled out a carefully kept folder, full of contracts, loan agreements, bank statements with my signature on them. I dropped it onto the table with a loud thud. I paid off $30 of our highest interest debt, from my own personal savings. Quietly, no applause, no press release. I just did it so this place, and all of you, wouldn't go under. George's brow furrowed. Margaret covered her mouth, visibly stunned. Claire tried to keep her composure, but her voice shook a little. "You're making this up. Just trying to make yourself look important." I turned to face her fully. My voice was steady, too steady. "Then check the signatures. Read the emails. Go through the contracts. And while you're at it, check the clause on ownership." I paused. Let the silence do the work. I currently hold 55% ownership of Brooks & Sons. That was part of the restructuring deal I signed with the bank. To secure the loan, I had to step up. I'm not just the girl in accounting anymore. I'm the one who kept this company standing. The last document I slid across the table was a copy of the contract. Red seal, clear signatures, no room for doubt. No one said a word. Claire's mouth opened like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. George looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. Margaret just stared at her phone like she was trying to disappear into the screen. I calmly gathered my documents, slid them back into my folder, and stood. I've kept quiet for 10 years. Everyone thought I was just background noise. Support staff. But I'm done being invisible. I turned to Claire one last time. Next time you call me useless, remember who paid for your marketing campaigns. And then I walked out of the room, leaving behind a silence so loud it echoed. No more smirks. No more dismissive comments. No more pretending I didn't exist. That moment changed everything. After that boardroom meeting, the fallout came. Exactly the way families do it. Not through honest, direct conversations, but through passive-aggressive voicemails, carefully worded emails, and thinly veiled guilt trips. Claire struck first. She sent an email to the board claiming I had exploited contractual loopholes and betrayed the family's trust for personal gain. It was the kind of polished language that dripped with venom. She painted herself as the victim, blindsided and heartbroken. Then came the call from my father. It was a Friday evening. I could hear a lawnmower humming in the background. He was probably pacing in the backyard. "Hannah," he said, "I just want to have an honest conversation. I don't know what game you're playing, but if you care about this family, you should really consider signing over those shares. Claire's more suited to leadership. You're not exactly that type." I stayed quiet for a beat. Then I said, "I've been quietly leading for years. Dad, you just never looked hard enough to see it." He sighed. "This is going to destroy our family. Hannah." I looked out my window as the sun dipped behind the rooftops of Willow Creek. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just not willing to disappear anymore." My mom texted a few days later. Same passive guilt in a softer voice. "I know you have your reasons. But I'm begging you. Don't let your pride tear this family apart. Claire is really hurting." I didn't respond right away. Maybe because I was still wrestling with the feeling I'd been trained my whole life to carry. Guilt. But the real shocker? Claire hired a lawyer. A real one. With an office downtown. And filed a lawsuit against me in local court. She accused me of contract fraud, coercion, and unjust enrichment. I almost laughed when I got the summons. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. She didn't just want to shut me up. She wanted to erase me. So I called Emma. She listened quietly, then said one sentence. "We're going to fight this. And this time, you're not alone." In court, Claire wore a black suit and sat on the plaintiff's side with her jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. I sat beside Emma, hands slightly shaking but head held high. Emma laid out everything, step by step. The original bank contract, the emails, the wire transfers, and even a statement from a retired banker who had worked with me during the refinancing. Claire had her word, and a shaky narrative about betrayal and family values. At the end of the hearing, the judge flipped through the documents and spoke plainly. Hannah Brooks entered into this agreement with full transparency and legal standing. There's no evidence of coercion. Her ownership of the company stands. Claire didn't say a word as we left the courtroom. Her face was pale, but for the first time, I didn't feel sorry for her. I just felt free. After that, I cut off every form of financial support to the family. No more quietly paying my mom's utility bills. No more helping Claire cover just one campaign. I sent one final email. From this point forward, each person takes responsibility for their own piece. I'm no longer carrying everyone. The company began to falter. No one was managing the finances. And Claire didn't have the skill set to handle cash flow issues. Some of the employees who used to snicker behind my back started emailing me for help. Others avoided eye contact in the hallway. Emma invited me to speak at a community finance workshop in Pittsburgh. "Your story," she said, "could help people realize they're allowed to stand up for themselves." I thought about it for a long time. Then said yes. I started changing things in my personal life. 2. I moved out of the old apartment that held too many shadows. I bought a smaller place near downtown, brighter, quieter, with a little sunroom that I turned into an art space. I signed up for a Saturday morning art class. I'm no good at painting, but every brushstroke felt like a breath of fresh air. I joined a short story writing group in the evenings, where people shared the kind of truths they normally kept buried. For the first time in years, I started to feel like I was actually living, not just surviving. One afternoon, a young employee named Jordan knocked on my office door with a notebook in hand. I heard what you said in the boardroom. They said, I want to learn how to do what you do with the finances. I don't want to spend my life being who other people say I am. I smiled. Come in. First lesson's easy. Know your worth. And I knew, finally. After all this time, I was building a new life. Not one designed to earn anyone's approval, but one that let me breathe. 6 months after the court ruling, I stood on a small stage at a community center in Pittsburgh. I wasn't there to present financials. I wasn't there to justify myself. I was there to tell a story I used to think no one wanted to hear. For a long time, I said into the mic, steady and clear, I believed my worth was measured by what I could do for other people. But then I learned. Real value comes from being willing to stand up for yourself, even when the people closest to you are the first ones to turn their backs. The room was silent. I used to sit in meetings where my name got laughs. I spent my 20s pouring in time, energy, and every penny I had saved just to keep others looking good. But there came a point when I realized, if I stayed quiet, I'd disappear from my own life. Down in the front row, a woman nodded so hard I thought she might cry. In the back, a younger girl wiped tears from her eyes. And in that moment, I realized something. This story wasn't just mine. It was theirs, too. It belonged to anyone who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or made to feel like they weren't enough. After the talk, more than a dozen people came up to me. One single mother said, "Your story made me want to reapply for the job I was forced to quit. They told me I wasn't flexible enough. But now, I know that wasn't my fault." A college freshman whispered, "I was thinking of dropping my finance class after my professor told me I wasn't cut out for numbers. But I'm going to finish it. Because I want to prove to myself that I can." I didn't know how many people I touched that day. But I knew, without a doubt, I wasn't just the girl in the background anymore. I still work with Brooks & Sons, as a financial advisor now, but I no longer carry the weight of the whole company. I take what's mine. I don't fix everything for everyone. I don't stay silent anymore. Claire and the rest of my family stopped reaching out. Maybe after the lawsuit, they couldn't accept that I was no longer the agreeable one. Funny thing is, I no longer feel the emptiness I used to dread. I started teaching free finance workshops for young women on Tuesday nights. I walk the trails by the Allegheny River every Sunday morning, letting the sun hit my face, breathing in air that somehow feels lighter now. One day, I got a handwritten letter in the mail from a young woman named Lily. She'd been in the audience at my Pittsburgh talk. "I never believed I deserved freedom from a toxic family," she wrote, "but when you said, your worth isn't defined by what you sacrifice, it's in the courage to protect yourself, it felt like you were speaking straight to me." I read her words over and over, tears running down my cheeks. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief that all the pain I'd carried had finally turned into something meaningful. Because here's the truth. Your worth isn't measured by how much you can endure. It's measured by the moment you finally say, "I deserve better." And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is quietly walk away from people who refuse to see your value, even if they're family. I don't know exactly what the future holds. But that day, walking beside the river, the sunset casting golden light on the water, I thought to myself, I finally came home to me. And that's enough. ChatGPT da noi. Sometimes life asks us to choose between staying silent to keep the peace, or speaking up to keep ourselves. Hannah Brooks's story isn't just about rebellion, it's about the quiet, powerful journey of reclaiming one's worth. It reminds us that self-respect isn't some lofty idea. It's the anchor that keeps us steady when others try to define our value for us. Too many people, especially in adulthood, live in relationships where love comes with strings attached, and recognition depends on sacrifice. But as the old saying goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't keep giving if you forget to honor your own needs. The real lesson? It's about having the courage to face what hurts, whether it comes from family, society, or our own self-doubt, and walking through it with grace, not bitterness. If you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or silenced like Hannah, we'd love to hear your story in the comments. Hit the like button if this resonated with you, and subscribe so you don't miss more stories that inspire, challenge, and stay with you. Wishing you peace, And may you always find your way back to yourself, no matter how far life tries to pull you away.